In a dirty room, a crazy teenager was having fun playing a computer game and eating stale pizza at the same time. In the room was a real stench and flies flew swarms, but it did not bother the guy, because he was upset only from the defeat of the virtual opponent. Angrily swearing, the guy threw the joystick on the floor and called the game too stupid. Finishing another slice of pizza, the young man looked at the murdered girls and was upset only by the foul odor that came from the corpses. 20 years later, awards were given to the best police officers who helped solve a long-standing case of a horrible maniac. One of those guys was a very promising and experienced officer of the 1st Investigation Division, Hiroki Dan. The officers remembered how difficult it was to catch the monster who killed the girls, and it was then that Hiroki proved himself to be the best, who was able to get on the trail of the criminal. Hiroki's father was a former police general, and the attractiveness of the smart officer always attracted the girls of the police department. The girls liked to discuss different rumors about Hiroki and his beautiful cottage located in the mountains. They also knew about the guy's passion for pottery, in which he was doing well. But still, one of the girls thought that there are no perfect people, which means that even Hiroki has bad habits or some weaknesses. Meanwhile, in the 1st Investigation Department, all the employees were watching with interest a special edition of a popular television program, and such behavior surprised Hiroki. The well-known anchor was talking about the horrible events of 20 years ago, when 2 little girls were murdered. A mad maniac dismembered the bodies of the girls and mailed them to their parents, which proved his cruelty and heartlessness. Girls, unlike men, did not follow what was happening on the screen, but continued to pay attention to Hiroki. This time the interest was aroused by a beautiful cup in the hands of the guy, which he made with his own hands. Meanwhile, the anchor continued the story and reported about the criminal, who turned out to be a 16-year-old boy. For his crime, he was nicknamed the Butcher Courier. The horrible murder of innocent children caused a wave of outrage throughout Japan, and people demanded the harshest punishment for the maniac. Hiroki also not too much into what was happening on the screen, because he was much more pleasant to communicate with attractive girls. As it turned out, the vile maniac was released after 18 years of imprisonment. Hiroki felt angry when the show's host started talking about the book that the released maniac was writing and announced its imminent publication. It then turned out that the killer had been invited into the studio for an exclusive interview. The presenter expressed confidence that everything will go quietly, as the staff did everything very carefully and prudently. Although of course this interview will cause a lot of criticism from the viewers. The host was of course ready to do anything for the sake of the rating of his show, and with undisguised pleasure introduced the man nicknamed the Butcher Courier. The host asked the guest to tell about the content of the future book. The guy behind the screen answered that the plot revolves around the psychological problems that led to the terrible murder of 2 girls. Then the maniac started sobbing and begging for forgiveness from his victims, who never got to know life. The guy explained that he should have been executed for the crime, but he was shown mercy and served his sentence in full. And now he got a second chance to become a good man and is ready to redeem his deed with good deeds. Everything looked like a staged show, but the host tried to convince the audience in the sincere repentance of the guest. At the same time, the presenter tried to keep the situation in tension and reminded about the crime for which one cannot forgive. Such an idiotic performance disgusted the police officers, and Hiroki did not believe a single word of the maniac, who simply could not regret his admission. The situation with the maniac's book was also irritating, because in it he described his crime and wanted to make a good profit from it. Employees of the 1st Department were outraged that many publishers are ready to publish the memoirs of a butcher's courier, and completely ignore the feelings of parents who suffered from the maniac. But apparently profit was far more important than the content of the book for the greedy publishers. The head of the 1st Department could not believe what he saw on the screen, because that crime was not just a murder, but a real manifestation of madness. Especially he himself took part in the investigation and is familiar with the terrible details. A week later, the released killer was invited to a meeting with a representative of the publisher at the main office. Courier butcher Sozan Yoshi did not hide his animal nature and complete lack of manners at all. The guy ate like a madman and did not pay attention to the surprised look of the publisher. After a few minutes, Sozan explained his behavior by his terrible hunger and asked how the audience liked his performance during the TV show, because he tried, although he still overplayed a little. But the publisher's representative was delighted and asked about a deadline for finishing the book. But Sozan decided not to break the intrigue and only thanked for a wonderful dinner, saying that he had not eaten so well for a long time. In the end, the maniac showed his true face and offered to tell how exactly he committed the crime. The representative of the publishing house did not deny his interest and silently listened to the details of the monster's horrible deed. Sozin enjoyed the memories of the murder and on a cooked piece of meat demonstrated exactly how he struck the victims. The maniac became completely relaxed and started laughing, talking about how he had gotten the great idea to send the bodies of the victims to their parents. The publisher was shocked and remained silent, watching a real monster in a human body. The memories of the crime pleased Sozin and he did not hide his emotions. But the interlocutor felt how the situation was getting out of control, and it became creepy to be near the madman. Then Sozin proposed to make a gift to the future readers of his book and organize a live show on television. Namely, to try to put on a show where his life could be watched by a hidden camera. The publisher silently filled his glasses and hoped for a quick conclusion to this meeting. But still, the thirst for more money and ratings made the greedy publisher offer to organize a meeting with the parents of the victims. The publisher had already seen how popular this show would be and wanted to call the best reporters. But Sozin did not hear his interlocutor and continued to talk about the hands with which he had committed the crime. After a few seconds, the monster lashed out and Sozin grabbed the publisher by the neck, enjoying his strength and power. The maniac admitted that it was a true pleasure to see the life fading away in a person. Still, Sozin let the victim go and contemplated the offer to meet the girl's parents, for the sake of a silly formal explanation. The mad maniac made the publisher eat a piece of melon and stated that he was not going to fulfill any demand, much less meet the victim's parents. Sozin then thanked him for lunch and said goodbye until the next meeting. Once in the filled subway car, Sozin saw every person, and especially the girls, as victims. He felt like a predator on the hunt and made a great effort to restrain his desire to kill again. Then Sozin noticed the TV screen showing news reports about him and telling him that such people did not deserve forgiveness. Soon reaching his house, Sozin noticed a crowd of outraged people who did not want a horrible murderer living in the neighborhood. Sozin immediately called the publisher and accused him of spreading confidential information. The publisher explained that there had been many offers to pre-order the book and it had been decided to release a trial incomplete version. Due to this hype, huge profits and publicity were expected. Sozin was pleased with this result, thinking people are real idiots because they criticize the authorities for letting the killer go free, but at the same time they want to read his book. The guy, sensing future profits, promised to finish the book as soon as possible. Thoughts of his new life made Sozin seclude himself in a dark alley, and he didn't even notice how he was already being watched. Without the slightest hesitation, Hiroki used a powerful stun gun and sent the butcher's courier to the ground. Some time later, Sozin woke up in an unfamiliar room and realized that he was firmly tied to 4 old chairs. Next to him sat quietly watching an old horror movie, Hiroki, who announced that the best part was about to begin. Sozin felt victimized for the first time in his life and began to demand to be let go. But Hiroki did not take his eyes off the screen and declared that this was the movie The Exorcist, the only horror movie that had been nominated for an Academy Award. The police officer with remarkable calmness told that the plot of the movie is that a 12-year-old girl has been possessed by a demon and 2 brave priests are trying to save her. Hiroki offered the captive to watch this masterpiece together, but Sozin responded with an insult and unsuccessfully tried to free his hands. The ruthless child killer felt horrified by Hiroki's calmness and began to call for help. But this only made the police officer laugh, who also shouted an impersonation of his captor. Slowly taking off his jacket, Hiroki explained that screaming in this place was absolutely useless as people were very far away from this isolated place. Hiroki, enjoying the captive's terror, asked if Sozin knew how many people disappeared without a trace every year. But the restrained maniac trembled with fear as he watched the stranger lift a heavy object covered with a cloth. A few seconds later, a real chainsaw was in the hands of the exemplary police officer. Hiroki still calmly stated that according to the National Police Department, 80,000 people go missing every year. The chainsaw came to life in Hiroki's hands and he explained that most missing people unfortunately die, but those who go missing are a separate category and none of them walk. Sozin was terrified and desperately tried to break free. Hiroki, anticipating retribution, said that even if Sozin disappeared without a trace, no one would ever regret it. With a swift movement of the chainsaw, Sozin's arm was cut open and a horrible scream was heard. But that was only the beginning of the painful redemption. Hiroki methodically slashed and watched the monster that was Sozin. The police officer had no regret, for he truly believed in the rightness of his actions. Sozin squealed in pain, but Hiroki only regretted the uneven cut, for as a true perfectionist he loved precision in everything. The child killer was shaking from painful shock, but Hiroki offered not to hold back his emotions and inner urges. The officer advised him not to be shy, because usually people in this situation are too nervous and it makes them nauseous. Sozin finally realized who he was facing and asked if it was all to avenge his crime. The maniac promised to give all his money he would get after the book was published, but he needed to live to do so. But Hiroki was indifferent to the requests of the victim, said that now on the screen will be his favorite scene, which cannot miss. The police officer, showing flexibility, repeated the pose of the movie character and asked why Sozin was not delighted with such a performance. Hiroki picked up the instrument of retribution again and suggested that the maniac move on to the climax of tonight's performance. Sozin lost consciousness due to the terrible pain, but after a while Hiroki helped the maniac to wake up and offered to evaluate his new image. For this purpose, Hiroki prepared a large mirror so that the victim would not miss a single detail. The police officer explained to his victim that it was a real masterpiece of which he was proud. But Sozin was shocked by what he saw in the mirror, for now he understood what it was like to be a helpless victim at the mercy of a powerful predator. Hiroki watched the result of the just retribution in silence for a few more minutes, thinking how else he could improve the result. Then the officer took the picture and stated that he wasn't really interested in revenge or money at all. After all, it was more important to see the desperation in his victim's eyes. Sozin sobbed, trying not to believe what was already inevitable, because now all he had to do was die for his sins. Hiroki reminded the maniac of his words on television, where he wanted to be forgiven for killing little girls, because it was all just a lie, so he did everything right. After Hiroki finished another retribution, he sat quietly in a cozy room with a fireplace and enjoyed the silence. The journal with photos of people who deserve real retribution was supplemented with one more character, and it was satisfying for Hiroki, because his methods were much more effective than the usual justice. The huge pottery kiln helped to get rid of the guests who had already received their punishment, and Hiroki was not afraid of making a mistake. Hiroki of course realized that his double life wasn't quite normal, but he couldn't do otherwise. The next day the police officer went to church as usual and confessed, telling the priest all the details of his revenge. The priest called it cruel, but still a good deed. Hiroki told of a good friend whom he would very much like to meet in heaven when his time comes, and that is why he should do as many good deeds as possible. The priest felt conflicting emotions after the confession and told his colleague about another visit from the man they nicknamed the Hero of Justice. The senior priest reminded of the importance of confession for everyone, and as long as it was safe would have to listen to that strange man, for it was their duty. Hiroki felt real relief after the confession and believed even more strongly in the necessity of his justice. All the more reason to do as many good deeds as possible while he had the chance. The guys were laughing in joy at their success, but it all looked too nasty. The drunken girl Yasuna didn't realize what was happening and lost her ability to resist. Such helplessness only warmed up the guys, who decided to capture everything on the video camera. The girl was defenseless, and this decided to take advantage of the naked guys just for fun. The guys enjoyed the process and slowly stripped their victim of her clothes. The leader of the group felt his complete superiority and led the others as if they were his toys. Nasty Ikwaki Teru suggested the other guys not to be shy and enjoy the availability of the girl, because she herself decided to join their merry company. The girl felt pain and wanted to scream to call for help, but her condition was so helpless that she couldn't do it. The victim couldn't fight back and decided that she might have been slipped something into the alcohol. After all, she had only had a few drinks. Hiroki asked a colleague what was known about the fate of the courier butcher, but of course no one knew what exactly happened to the creepy killer. What was known was that the publication of the maniac's book had been postponed. Hiroki speculated that perhaps the publishers had come to their senses and decided not to ruin their image. Hiroki decided to have a little rest on the roof alone and drink coffee, but he didn't manage to do that, and a girl from the department asked him to give her some time. The girl apologized for disturbing Hiroki's break, but the guy didn't take umbrage and just told her how he failed miserably in creating his new cup because of the wrong calculation of ingredients. The girl didn't immediately realize what she was talking about, but Hiroki immediately told her about his passion for pottery and showed her a handmade mug that was meant for hot coffee. The cup was indeed deformed, but the cute animal design appealed to the girl, who thought it was a cute kitty. But the guy explained that it was actually a rabbit, but apparently the drawing didn't work out. Hiroki of course realized that this conversation had happened for a reason and asked the girl what exactly was bothering her. Hiroki explained that he immediately sat in the girl's face and she is very bad at hiding with my emotions. After thinking for a bit, the girl admitted that Hiroki was very hard to fool and then told him about a report from a college student. The report started with the young student going out drinking at a party with her friends, which was organized by one of the university students. During the party, one of the guys suggested a strange game. The loser of the game had to drink a glass of beer, and this initially seemed like a fun suggestion for everyone at the party. The guys were of course eager to get the girls drunk and were constantly ordering new servings of alcohol. Yasuna also participated in this silly game, though she didn't like getting very drunk. The girl tried to refuse another glass of booze, but all the party members insisted on her participation in the game. Under the influence of her friends and the guys' insistence, Yasuna very soon felt drunk and too tired. In the end, all the girls were drunk and had little recollection of leaving the raucous party. It turned out that the 3 guys had called a separate cab for the 2 girls besides Yasuna. In the end, Yasuna could only remember the unfamiliar apartment and how the quite cheerful guys had turned into animals and taken advantage of her condition. Waking up the next day, the girl found herself abandoned in an alley near the train station in a terrible state. A month after the incident, Yasuna had the courage to speak about what had happened that night. The police officer advised her to get a medical checkup at the hospital and write a police report, and Yasuna eventually followed this advice. Fortunately, the tests for various diseases and pregnancy were negative, and that was good news. But Yasuna's mental trauma will stay with her forever. During the proceedings, the guy who organized the party denied his involvement, and no evidence was ever found. The girl admitted that she felt helpless because she was unable to help the student. Hiroki understood the complexity of the situation and offered his help if needed. The girl thanked for the offer, and Hiroki felt the very feeling that made him hungry for revenge. A few days later, Yasuna Hamada accepted the offer to meet with lawyer Akira Maruyama, who immediately offered to take the girl a thick envelope. The envelope contained a huge amount of money, and the lawyer explained that it was compensation for the inconvenience for Ikwaki. But in exchange for this money, Yasuna must drop all her charges and withdraw her statement from the police. The girl immediately refused and threw the envelope on the table. But the lawyer was not going to back down and advised to listen to his words. Akira stated that his client Ikwaki had assumed that Yasuna would decide to go to the police to file a report. But it was just a silly mistake. The lawyer stated that the girl herself, under the influence of alcohol, agreed to be intimate with the students that night, and he even has evidence that he is ready to show right now. The video on the laptop brought Yasun back to that nightmarish evening she tried to forget, and she had to hear the voices of her abusers again. The guys' cheerful laughter was only disgusting as they acted like real animals mocking their victim. Yasuna couldn't stand a few minutes of this video and slammed the laptop lid down with force. The lawyer explained that if Yasuna continues to insist on the abuse charge, to immediately send this video to the police, where they will be able to determine how she herself voluntarily consented to intimacy with the guys. And if that's what happens, a huge number of people will see that video and learn all the details of that incident. The lawyer felt victorious in this situation and advised the girl to reconsider her decision and choose the option that would be better for her. But the ideal option for everyone would be to cancel the statement and drop the charges. Leaving, the lawyer decided to hurt Yasun even more and reminded her that many girls would be grateful to receive good money for very mediocre intimate services in her place. Aoyama Teichai used the services of the student loan bank and withdrew money from the ATM. Soon the guy made his mandatory membership fee to the head of the Ikwaki student organization. The amount was 53,000 yen, and it was all for the sake of membership in the organization. Ikwaki was in complete control of the available money and felt like a real master at entertaining. Aoyama met Ikwaki about 6 months ago and it changed his life. After a few weeks at the college, all the students were divided into 2 groups, regardless of their interests and preferences. On one side were the total losers and the cool students who allowed themselves anything. Aoyama felt like a loser even at school, and was bullied by the other students. The guy was a virgin and felt like everyone treated him like a loser and tried to humiliate him. Aoyama always studied hard to get into an elite university and expected that his situation would change for the better. But as it turned out, it was a mistake. After entering the university, Aoyama continued to live a lonely life. On one of the usual days, Ikwaki offered the humble student to change his life with his help. Aoyama didn't know how to respond to the offer, and Ikwaki explained that if he didn't change, he would be miserable the rest of his life as a loser. At a regular student organization meeting, Ikwaki stated that there are only 2 types of people in the world: the elite and the scum. so it doesn't matter if a person enters a prestigious university or company, because a loser will still be a loser. But if a person decides to join his student organization, he will be able to feel elite. The members of this organization will gain confidence and will be able to achieve success even among girls. Aoyama listened with interest to Ikwaki's colorful speech, who promised his help in reaching heights that no loser would ever reach on his own. MOT was the most popular student club at the university and had a huge number of members. Ikwaki was the head of the club and held the title of emperor. He also had aides with the status of aristocrats, and the ordinary members of this organization were called townspeople. Aoyama at this moment remembered all those terrible moments when he felt like a failure and hoped that joining this club would help him change his life. The entry fee was 10,000 yen and the annual fee was 53,000 yen. Aoyama decided not to spare the money and wanted to join this club. But what if he couldn't achieve success? He would just leave the club. Ikwaki gladly accepted the money as an entrance fee and welcomed the new member into the club. The emperor of the student organization suggested that Aoyama start changing his life every day. 3 months later, at the next student meeting, Ikwaki was telling all the participants about the significant change in their lives, because now they were no longer the scum and could call themselves the elite. Ikwaki was pleased with the result, as many of the club members were able to get high-paying jobs as actors and models. On top of that, the number of club members had increased to 30,000 and they were all incredibly popular with the girls. Aoyama really felt much better after joining the student club and had a fun time among his new friends. But despite the fun, some of the guys did some bad things and often slipped drugs into the girls' alcohol. Aoyama participated in such parties and ended up being an accomplice to a crime organized by Ikwaki. Aoyama realized that it was too dangerous and said that it was wrong to do that to a girl. But the other guys advised him not to worry and to take the opportunity to enjoy intimacy with the young girl. Ikwaki turned out to be a real monster who manipulated people, and Aoyama realized that now he wouldn't be able to influence the situation. Ikwaki promised that the girl would not even remember what had happened to her that evening, because she was very drunk and had no control over her body. Aoyama was under Ikwaki's influence and did the wrong thing in life. After everything that happened, Aoyama felt tired and just tried not to think about anything. Ikwaki reminded him that they were members of the same club and should share everything for fun without thinking about silly moral principles. Aoyama was completely under Ikwaki's influence and eventually became his personal assistant. Aoyama was enjoying his new role and had even changed his hair under Ikwaki's influence after visiting a recommended beauty salon. Ikwaki, in turn, had completely subsumed his new assistant and even claimed that today's party was thrown in his honor. But all of this was only one side of the coin that hid a darker part. The cost of participating in this club included the added expense of dressing up and maintaining his image. Aoyama quickly began to realize that his parents' money was completely insufficient for him to live on and have fun. Aoyama worked part-time at the store and sometimes found himself on the night shift with Akamura. The girl turned out to be very shy and attractive, as well as pleasant to talk to. Aoyama suggested that the girl go to the movies and decided that his confidence in socializing was a credit to the student club. After visiting the movie theater, Aoyama and Akamura went to a restaurant. The guy acted strictly according to the instruction he received at the club and expected something more during the date. Firmly taking the girl's hand, Aoyama tried to hint Akamura on the development of relations. But the girl quickly got rid of the grip and was greatly embarrassed by such insistence. Akamura explained that this was the first time she was on a date and had never held a guy's hand before. Aoyama decided not to insist on intimacy, realizing that this girl was too nice for such an attitude. The guy just wanted to chat and walk Akamura to the subway station. This date changed a lot of things in Aoyama's perception, and he wanted to leave the club where it was all about fun. Aoyama told him that he had met a beautiful girl and wanted to have a serious relationship with her, and that was why he had to leave the club. The guys only laughed and called it an interesting game the whole time. They are members of the club and Aoyama should not deprive himself of fun. But the guy was too serious and paid 13,000 yen for his exit. Aoyama promised to never tell anyone what they did at the club, and especially about that night with the drunk girl. Ikwaki suddenly announced that he was not against Aoyama's decision to leave the club and would not stop him from building a new life. As usual, Ikwaki politely wished his former close friend happiness with the girl, and Aoyama believed in the sincerity of the emperor of the club. But a few days later, during an evening walk, Aoyama and Akamura heard a strange van approaching and they were frightened. The guys who ran out of the car brutally attacked the young couple and then kidnapped their victims. As expected, the organizer of this crime was of course Ikwaki, who was skillfully manipulating other people. Ayami was shocked by what was happening and could not resist. All of this amused the emperor of the student club, and he angrily reminded them that they should share everything for fun. Rama met with Yasuna again and decided to clarify if it was true that the girl was going to withdraw her statement from the police and not press charges anymore. Rama wanted to know the details of such a decision, but the agitated girl insisted on her decision, not wanting to contact the police. Yasuna explained that she no longer wanted to remember the events of that horrible evening, and after saying goodbye to her friend, she decided to end the meeting. After that meeting, Rama had told her colleague Hiroki about the victim's act of violence, but it was absolutely known that the main perpetrator of the crime was of course Ikwaki Teru. But in the end, with the help of a cunning lawyer, Ikwaki was able to convince the frightened girl to abandon all charges and claims. All this happened thanks to the video, where the girl, being under the influence of alcohol, allegedly agreed to intimacy. Rama was able to find out that in the past there have been similar cases, but all the women who tried to sue Ikwaki and immediately withdrew their applications. Hiroki had also heard of similar situations, but didn't go into details. Hiroki knew that Ikwaki's father owned a huge corporation and was a rather famous politician, so his son's spoiled behavior always only increased with impunity. Not wanting to ruin his own image, Hiroki's father hired an experienced lawyer for his son, who solved all his problems. This rich family owns several apartments in the elite neighborhood of Fuel, and therefore the vile son can use them at will. Rama said that Yasun's victim had been abused in one of these apartments. Hiroki once again felt a strong desire to punish the perpetrator of the crime with his own methods. Meanwhile, Ikwaki was enjoying watching another crime video with his subordinates. After kidnapping Ayami and Akamura, the criminals were once again enjoying their superiority and abusing the victims in every way possible. Ikwaki, with his twisted psyche, decided to punish the unruly boy who dared to leave his student club. Ikwaki outdid himself this time and robbed the harmless Ayami of his left eye. The stunned girl was horrified by the bullying, but of course could not influence the situation in any way. As usual, Ikwaki filmed all his crimes on a video camera and enjoyed the very process of suffering people. Ikwaki gathered around him real maniacs, which he skillfully manipulated and forced to play so-called cruel games with his victims. Ayami felt a lot of pain from his wounds, but it didn't bother anyone at all, and Ikwaki only reminded that if someone wants to have fun with a girl, he should share it with all the club members. Eventually, after the kidnapping, Ikwaki promised to do the same thing if Ayami, and once again tried to pin him down and also put the video online, and then everyone would know of his shame. Ayami was broken after this incident and tried to call Akamura, but the girl did not answer her calls or voice messages. Ayami decided to visit the girl at home, but spotted an ambulance. Judging from the conversations of locals, the guy found out that Akamura jumped from the roof, but still survived. The girl was seriously injured, and her distraught parents did not understand why their beloved daughter had decided to such a desperate act. Ayami was shocked by the situation, but of course he realized his own guilt, although he tried to push these thoughts away. But for Ikwaki's accomplices, this was just another distraction. Ikwaki was also influenced by his personal lawyer, who also took pleasure in the suffering of strangers. The vile lawyer watched the video of the horrific crime with interest and thanked Ikwaki for the interesting performance. Ikwaki was thus thanking his lawyer for his help, for he always helped him to get away with his crimes. But Ikwaki was actually very happy that his personal lawyer turned out to be a fan of banned videos, for he was easy to manipulate in this way. Ayami came to Ikwaki and reported the completion of his assignment, in time to collect all the membership fees for the whole year. Just at that moment, a strange message arrived on Ikwaki's phone. The message was signed with an unfamiliar name, and it suggested that he go to the balcony immediately. Ikwaki was very surprised, but still his curiosity made him go to the balcony. Just at that moment, Ayami burst into the room with a huge axe in his hands and started administering his own justice. Everyone was shocked by this act, but there was nothing they could do against the enraged guy. The guys received fatal blows with the axe, but in the meantime Ikwaki decided to hide on the balcony and avoid severe punishment. For the first time in his life, this spoiled teenager felt real terror and quickly noticed an emergency exit that led to the next building. It seemed like a rescue, and Ikwaki decided to escape the axe guy. Ikwaki quickly made his way to the next building and met the strange guy. Hiroki politely asked what happened, and a terrified Ikwaki told him about the madman swinging the axe and killed his friends. Hiroki enjoyed the terror in Ikwaki's eyes and promised to call the police immediately, but after a few minutes he pretended he couldn't get through. Hiroki then laughed and stated that he had made a mistake, as he was not holding a phone but a regular taser. Ikwaki didn't have time to appreciate the joke and was instantly tasered in the neck. After Ikwaki woke up, he realized that he was chained to the bed and did not know what was going on. Hiroki watched his favorite movie on the huge screen as usual and congratulated the prisoner on his awakening. Ikwaki started to get indignant and demanded to release him immediately, but Hiroki had already prepared the instrument of retribution, and then quickly told about his favorite movie. The vigilante cop promised another victim to rid him of his demons, just as the protagonist in the movie had saved the girl. Hiroki advised Ikwaki to relax, because he would have to find out what it was like to get rid of demons very soon. A few minutes later, Ikwaki was howling in terrible pain, and Hiroki once again advised the victim to choose the most comfortable position. Ikwaki's happening, and from the way he was being abused by the unknown guy, the emperor of the student club started offering money for his freedom and explained that his father was a very rich man and would shell out any amount. Ikwaki was fully confident that he could solve the problem with money, because he saw the kidnapper as just another scum. But Hiroki refused and explained that he had never been interested in money, because there were more interesting things. Hiroki took out his favorite camera and said that he was a well-to-do man and therefore had a lot of free time, which he was happy to spend on good and just deeds, enjoying his hobby. Ikwaki continued to shout and demanded the stranger to explain what he really wanted. Hiroki replied in a completely calm voice that he needed Ikwaki to feel true despair and fear. After all, that was the true pleasure of making scum feel all the things they did to other people. Soon it was over and the huge furnace once again consumed the man who deserved retribution for his horrible deeds. The next day, everyone already knew what had happened in Ikwaki's apartment, where 4 dead students were found. Rima said that one of the members of the Aoyama student club had been arrested and had fully confessed to the crime, as well as talking about the crimes that Ikwaki and the other members of the student club had committed. Ikwaki had been reported missing for the time being, and the Metropolitan Police Department would do its best to uncover the full circumstances of the crimes. Rime explained that the prestigious Ikwaki family would now lose almost everything they had achieved and become outcasts amongst society. Therefore, Yasuna might consider this as some sort of retribution. Rime advised the girl to approach her with any question, for she could always listen and help in a difficult situation, and that was the least she could offer. Yasuna did feel relieved after such news, for now those people who had insulted her were dead and the main one was gone. Meanwhile, Akamura was also in the hospital when she saw a news report about the beginning of the investigation into the crimes committed by the university students. Akamura cried and explained to her mother that she would be fine and promised to get better soon. Hiroki, meanwhile, was feeling uplifted after another retribution and visited the church for confession as usual. An agitated TV anchor interrupted the airing of an entertainment show for a breaking news bulletin that reported an emergency situation in Minato Shopping Center. A young man attacked ordinary people with a knife for no reason and injured many. As a result, the Metropolitan Police Department detained the 20-year-old and tentatively charged him with premeditated murder. Reporter Onizuwa Masaharu was one of the first to arrive on the scene and immediately noticed the crying boy. Onizuwa was the most egotistical reporter and without any regrets began questioning the boy about his mom's death, trying to get as many details as possible for his report. Rima couldn't stand impudent journalists and immediately asked Onizuwa to stay away from the scene. But the journalist is always reminded of his duty to the public, who had the right to know the most important news. After a few minutes, Hiroki intervened and said that the boy was a relative of the victim and that the police would protect him, while the journalists should not interfere with the investigation. Rima thanked Hiroki for his help, as she could hardly get rid of the annoying journalists. But as it turned out, Onizuwa wasn't going to back down, because he was willing to do anything for a story. The egotistical journalist quickly found the apartment of the perpetrator's parents and began to insist on talking to him. Onizuwa immediately stated that Mrs. Liu's son had committed a terrible crime and she should comment on the situation. The distraught woman asked him not to come to her house anymore, because it would annoy the neighbors too much. But Onizuwa demanded an exclusive interview or else he would continue to come to her house every day. Onizuwa started shouting loudly that her son had brutally murdered 12 people, and Mrs. Liu agreed to let the journalist into the apartment. Onizuwa immediately stated that the woman had raised her son too cruelly and she should tell more about it. After all, it was most likely that this cruel upbringing had turned the child into a brutal killer. Onizuwa asked provocative questions and asked the woman to admit her guilt and apologized to the relatives of the victims. The woman, being in a stressful situation, started crying and regretting the deed of her son. This is what the greedy journalist achieved and began to question the woman about how she abused her son. But at that moment, the woman's daughter entered the room and demanded that the journalist should immediately leave their apartment as they had nothing to tell. Onizuka complied with the demand, but on parting promised to come back and get details about the life of the perpetrator. On his way to the office, Onizuka had already started working on a new report especially emphasizing on the social evils that remain out of sight of justice until tragedy strikes. Onizuka pondered aloud on the need for punishment for the parents who raised the killer. The reporter implored his driver to get his thoughts right. In the end, the narcissistic Onizuka declared his desire to stand up for order and justice, though it was all skewed by his own motives. A few days later, Onizuka's report largely blamed Mrs. Liu for her son's crime, and the woman couldn't take it, committing suicide. Of the whole family, the only one left was the girl who regretted her matter, who sincerely blamed herself for her son's crime. But in any case, fate was too cruel. But Onizuka decided not to stop there and decided to continue his twisted justice, pitting many journalists against the girl. The girl was stunned at this treatment of herself, as all the brazen journalists were trying to find out how she felt about this horrible situation. Onizuka kept asking the most painful questions, and after a few days released a report about the mother who raised a mass murderer. Reporter Onizuka's daughter young Arisu attended a private school for girls called Juliet. The most discussed topic of the last few days was the mass murder at the mall, and the family of the perpetrator, who was hiding many secrets. The most ordinary math teacher Suzuki Takashi hated to hold lessons in this class, because the spoiled students constantly arranged competitions to throw various objects at him. Arisu was cruel to the young teacher and this time organized a real attack with her accomplices. Harmless and shy Takashi was not ready for such treatment and did not know how to react to the cruelty of his students. The girls, however, took advantage of the situation and enjoyed insulting and waterboarding the teacher. Takashi still decided to stand up and somehow solve the problem, but this only made Arisa angry. The girl wanted total submission from the teacher and ordered to do whatever she said. In the end, the grown man couldn't stand the abuse and pushed the insolent student away, so that she crashed into the wall. Arisu instantly accused Takashi of physically abusing the student and promised to file a formal complaint. The girlfriends acted as witnesses and soon everyone involved was in the principal's office. Onizuka of course arrived at the school and decided to participate in the proceedings, recalling that he was a journalist. Teacher Takashi was accused of being physically abusive to the students. Takashi apologized, but Onizuka said that it was not sincere remorse and the teacher did not even understand the trauma he had caused his daughter. The journalist demanded that the math teacher be fired, but even the principal was against such a harsh punishment and asked everyone to calm down. The principal explained that there was no evidence of physical violence and it could all be just a trivial misunderstanding. Onizuka decided that now the principal was trying to make his daughter look like a lying girl who made it all up and was accusing the teacher in vain. Onizuka promised to personally look into the situation and find answers, because he is a journalist and should be a voice of justice for the weak who cannot defend themselves. The next day, the newspapers carried an article about a teacher who is cruel to his students. And in the evening, Onizuka appeared on television and spoke about the horrors going on in the private school. After that, public attention descended on the administration of the private school, and the phones did not stop ringing throughout the working day. The principal was shocked by this situation and told teacher Takashi that the school was under pressure from parents and the media. The principal advised the teacher to stay home for a while until all the fuss calmed down, because unfortunately there was no other option. Arisu was pleased with the result and boasted that she had managed to get rid of the nasty teacher, although her father, a well-known journalist, had been very helpful. Arisu repeatedly said that it would now be a lot of fun to watch the journalists drive Takashi insane. Journalists, really like a pack of rabid dogs, surrounded the math teacher's house and did not give a quiet life. In the end, Takashi's broken psyche couldn't take it and he did something irreparable not only to himself, but also to his family. Onizuka continued to attend various TV programs that were concerned with the problem of teachers' violence towards students. Onizuka felt like a real star on television and argued that child abuse was a real crime. Onizuka explained that inappropriate behavior of teachers leads to psychological and physical injuries. Onizuka called himself a journalist who has a duty to shine light on issues and tell the truth. The body of the math teacher and his wife was soon discovered and generated intense media interest. The Metropolitan Police Department discussed that all doors and windows were tightly closed and there were no signs of intruders. The investigation revealed that 2 days prior to the incident, the mother of the deceased teacher was concerned that her son was not answering his cell phone, and so she contacted the police for help. Through reconstruction of the events, it was revealed that Takashi had strangled his wife Amiko and then committed suicide. The only survivor was a young 1-year-old daughter who was taken to the hospital for evaluation. The department head inquired about the teacher's motives that led to this tragedy, and Hiroki offered to read his report, which included a popular weekly magazine from a month ago. Hiroki recounted the incident at the private school and how the teacher had been accused of using physical force on a female student. After that, the teacher, Takashi, had not left the house and was apparently experiencing serious depression. There was also documented evidence found on Takashi's computer. Hiroki suggested turning to the second page, where the teacher admitted his guilt and spoke of sincere remorse. Takashi explained that he had been forced to do this to the student because he himself had been the victim of bullying by the students. As it turned out, Takashi reported it to the principal, but it didn't change anything, and eventually he became guilty of violence. The media did not deal with the incident and constantly slept outside his house trying to find a convenient moment to ask questions. The teacher's last entry ended with him saying that he could no longer control his emotions and did not want to continue to be under such psychological pressure. Next, Officer Hiroki offered to review one video clip of students actually being violent towards teacher Takashi. This video ended up on the internet a few days ago and could be viewed by anyone. The investigating officers were shocked by the new facts of the case and realized that the teacher's accusations of violence were not quite right. Rama tried to realize all the events that happened in the private school and stated that of course violence against students was an unacceptable form of communication. But Takashi was in a desperate situation. The media didn't look into the details of the incident at the private school and revealed the story only from one side, so all the responsibility fell on the teacher. Meanwhile, everyone at the school was shocked by the video posted online, and many students realized that the math teacher had actually committed suicide because of Arisu. For the girl, it was time she found herself in the role of Takashi's teacher, as everyone around her was calling her a murderer. Onizuka returned home, found his crying daughter in her room, and decided to talk to her. Her father explained that her mother had asked her to discuss the situation, as everyone was very worried about Arisu's emotional state. Onizuka stated that even though he was divorced from his wife, it had no effect on Arisu's attitude. The father explained that he too saw the video online and understands what's going on. The girl cried again and started to explain that she just wanted to have fun with her friends and didn't want Takashi's teacher to commit suicide. But Onizuka didn't show any interest in his daughter's emotional state at all. He was only interested in another exclusive report, and so he asked Arisa to tell about her bullying of the math teacher. The father said that he just had to get the interview, because after such a story he would be called a god of journalism, and he would also be paid good money for exclusive news from his own daughter. Onizuka asked uncomfortable questions to his daughter, trying to find out more details about her relationship to her teacher, as well as how she felt after his death. Arisu kept crying and didn't want to go to jail, but the greedy father promised that everything would be alright. Onizuka ended up calling his daughter a murderer for more drama in the report, and expressed regret that Arisu would not get the punishment she deserved, and he was ready to try her himself. After saying that, Onizuka again asked his stunned daughter how she felt about being a murderer. The next day, an exclusive article about his own daughter came out, where Onizuka accused Arisa of bullying teachers and driving them to suicide. The egotistical journalist was happy with the result of his work, for he had created another news hit. Onizuka shared his impressions of the interview with his daughter and completely ignored the report that Arisu ended up committing suicide out of terrible guilt. Onizuka was only interested in his job and the opportunity to climb the career ladder, so he was willing to do anything to tell the tragic story of a private school teacher. Suddenly, Onizuka saw a car overtaking him and became indignant at the manner in which the elderly man was driving. The journalist kept shouting and cursing the stranger, but then decided to take advantage of the situation and crash into the stranger's car and then explain everything by the malfunction of the braking system. But just at that moment, the mad journalist noticed the stranger in the back seat of his car. Onizuka became indignant and tried to find out from the stranger who he was, but Hiroki ordered him to stay still and keep his eyes on the road. The police officer then joked that the scariest thing in horror movies is finding a stranger in the back seat. After a few seconds, the greedy journalist felt the effects of the taser and lost consciousness. After that, Onizuka got behind the wheel and quickly went to his country house where not quite legal justice was being served. Soon the egotistical journalist woke up and realized that he was tied to a chair. Hiroki was already prepared for this and asked how Onizuka was feeling. The journalist was scared and didn't understand what was happening. but Hiroki poured a strange liquid from a vial on the victim's head. Onizuka felt a terrible pain and burning sensation, and the police officer explained that he uses this original drink consisting of concentrated hydrochloric acid to drive evil out of possessed people. The journalist tried to break free and asked what the stranger wanted to do to him in the first place, but Hiroki only smiled evilly and explained that it was just another interview. Hiroki said that this was an exclusive opportunity for the vile scumbag journalist, and now he should think and answer about his feelings. But Onizuka wouldn't answer the questions, and the police officer started forcing his victim to drink the liquid from the vial. Hiroki explained that Onizuka deserved the punishment he deserved and he would try to make the best of it. The journalist tried to scream, but the acid burned his vocal cords, and Hiroki said that Onizuka's vile voice would never be heard again. Then it was photo time, and Hiroki explained that Onizuka had now gotten the justice he deserved for his reporting. At the next press conference at the private school, everyone was surprised by the absence of the scandalous journalist Onizuka himself, and many decided that the greedy man had interviewed someone dangerous after all and paid for it. Soon the principal of the private school came out to the journalists, and everyone noticed his crying face. But no one showed compassion and called it a mere trickery for the sake of public sympathy. The press conference at the private high school and Juliet was broadcasted live, and everyone wanted to get clarification of the situation from the principal himself, because recently a lot of scandalous news was connected with this educational institution. The school director said that indeed some students had bullied the tragically deceased math teacher, and therefore all those involved were expelled or suspended. But the egotistical journalists still want the school principal to take full responsibility and admit his incompetence, because he didn't investigate the case thoroughly before suspending Takashi. A few days later, Hiroki and Rama handed over the dead teacher's young daughter to her parents, who thanked them for their help in this difficult process. The teacher's parents promised to raise the child and take care of her fate, for that was what their son and daughter-in-law would want. Hiroki felt that he had done the right thing in this situation and tried to portray a ridiculous look that made the child laugh. After saying goodbye to her parents, Rama's teacher stated that the media had negatively influenced this whole situation, so the little girl should grow up to be a happy person despite the cruelty of the world around her. Just at that moment, the police officer living a double life decided to give a gift to the girl in the form of a small ceramic figurine. Rama joked that it was a fragment of some meteorite, but Hiroki explained that it was actually a special holder for bamboo sticks in the form of a small bear, and he made many such figures in his spare time. The girl remembered the pottery that Hiroki was into, but in fact the huge kiln in the country house was burning not only for the sake of beautiful clay products. After personal justice over the vile journalist, Hiroki was relaxing in his apartment and enjoying a great dinner. Another good deed inspired Hiroki to new deeds, which had to be carefully concealed. Every morning Hiroki started at 6 a.m. with a refreshing contrast shower that quickly got rid of his drowsiness. The man in charge of secret personal retribution lived alone and usually read the latest newspaper at breakfast. Hiroki found that the lights on his bicycle didn't work and decided to walk today and then take public transportation. It had been a long time since Hiroki had used the train, and upon reaching the nearest station he found himself in the midst of a huge number of people. The train car was crowded and Hiroki's attention was attracted by a girl with a small child who was crying loudly. In this carriage rode an ordinary office worker, Ogata Yudai, who hated absolutely all the people around him and mentally resented that the girl could not calm the child. The girl felt awkward, especially after Yudai called it stupid to drive during rush hour with a small child. Hiroki decided to distract the young mom and inquired about the baby's age. As it turned out, the infant was born only 8 months old and was just starting his life. One of the older women also supported the conversation by talking about her grandchild, and the girl kept apologizing for the inconvenience because the baby kept screaming. But even in this situation, Yudai found reason to be outraged and mentally called Hiroki a stupid, polite idiot who wants to appear honorable to strangers. Yudai could barely contain his emotions and thought that the girl was an ill-mannered mediocrity who did not deserve human compassion. Soon Yudai reached his office and asked that the young girl Miki make him tea next time. Miki decided it was all just a silly joke and laughed, even though she liked the young guy's attention. Yudai said that the tea prepared by the beauty was much tastier and more flavorful. The guy didn't even realize that he had insulted the Yamasa woman who usually prepared drinks for everyone with his words. Soon after, Yudai was summoned to the head of the department for an important conversation about team behavior. The manager explained that in the past Yudai's behavior could be excused as a bad joke, but now times had changed and one had to be careful about what he said. Yudai apologized for his behavior, but felt no remorse at all, thinking his supervisor was an arrogant idiot who reprimanded him because of stupid women. Once again at the subway station after work, Yudai looked for an opportunity to vent his anger and immediately pushed away the strange girls who were just chatting amongst themselves. But that wasn't enough for Yudai, and he continued to push all the women in his way, mentally calling them vile creatures. All of this amused the office worker who enjoyed hurting other people. Then Yudai noticed a girl with a baby stroller holding a cell phone, and he saw her as another victim for his amusement. Yudai purposely put his foot under the baby stroller and began to loudly resent the girl's behavior. Yudai demanded that the girl apologize for her careless behavior and masterfully portrayed herself as the victim. Yudai stated that such behavior was unacceptable, and one should not be distracted by the phone while driving a baby stroller. The girl, trying to calm the child, felt embarrassed and explained that she was just using her phone to look for the right road. But Yudai continued to blame the girl for the trouble she had caused. Yudai enjoyed the way the girl apologized and eventually, feeling superior, allowed the young mother to go about her business. At that moment, Hiroki was nearby, who, like many of the town's residents, was returning home. The officer asked Yudai if everything was alright, but the office worker, satisfied with his meanness, decided to move on. The subway car was crowded as it had been earlier in the morning, and once again there was a girl with a small crying child among the passengers. Yudai hated such young girls and thought that their noisy children were only a nuisance to people who were tired after a day's work. Yudai stared at the young mother who was unsuccessfully trying to soothe the infant, and mentally resented that the girl was so talentless that she couldn't handle this problem. But then the twisted mind of a sociopath decided to punish the girl for violating a fictional etiquette that was invented by Yudai. The office worker who hates all people decided to get sneaky and undo the lock on the girl's back during a train stop. After the carriage doors opened, the infant began to fall and the young mother was terrified, for she had no time to react and catch the child. The scream of the young mother attracted the attention of numerous passengers, and everyone saw the girl falling to the floor. The young mom managed to save her baby from a hard fall, but she herself hit her head hard. The girl did not even notice how she bled from the wound, because she was worried only for her baby. But the subway passengers immediately rushed to call an ambulance, because the young mother was losing consciousness from the injury. Yudai was pleased with the result of his despicable act and regretted only that the young girl and her baby did not fall under the train. The selfish office worker hurried to leave the scene, but the vigilant Hiroki immediately realized and identified the culprit. A renewed thirst for retribution forced the police officer to identify a new target. Yudai went to his favorite bar, where, after a few drinks, he began to argue that ugly and old women should be exterminated because they were of no use to anyone. Yudai told the random guy that women should stay at home and take care of the children, because that's what they were created for. The random guy thought such words were too harsh and reminded Yudai that this would make all women hate him. But Yudai continued to mock all women who try to get equal rights with men, because it's all nonsense and they should obey their husband's demands. The selfish office worker also believed that men should earn money and that women could only raise children, because they were only destroying men's teams. Yudai, of course, did not notice how the young guy was watching him and soon felt that he got drunk too quickly and decided to go home. Hiroki took advantage of the situation at the bar and discreetly added a medical drug to Yudai's glass. Soon the office worker found himself in a subway station and felt an overwhelming urge to sleep. Once inside the filled subway car, Yudai again noticed a young girl wearing a badge of a mom-to-be on her bag. This caused another surge of hatred, and Yudai decided to do something else nasty to the pregnant woman. Yudai sincerely hoped that all the tired people in the subway car would be indifferent to the pregnant girl and would never give up their seats. To Yudai, the mom-to-be was just a stupid girl who didn't use contraceptives in time and was now playing the role of a noble woman. After a few minutes, one of the female passengers politely gave the pregnant girl a seat, but a drunken Yudai intervened and took the seat, completely ignoring the women's indignation. Yudai enjoyed his insolence and selfishness and thought that he was only taking an empty seat because he was very tired and feeling weak. After a few stops, the train approached the final station and there was no one left in the carriage except the sleeping Yudai. This was the perfect moment for Hiroki to take advantage of the situation, and as the train conductor attempted to wake up his next victim of retribution, Yudai resented it and complained of a headache, completely unwilling to wake up. Hiroki only grinned in response and said that the drunkard was breaking the rules of behavior. Yudai woke up only in the morning and felt a severe headache and hangover. Only a few minutes after his awakening, the office worker realized that he was not in his apartment at all, but on the edge of a huge abyss. Incredible horror came over the egoist and he screamed with fear. Bound hands and feet gave no chance to escape, and Yudai noticed a young handsome guy who was smiling calmly and looking at him. Hiroki explained that they were on a railroad bridge that had been closed over 30 years ago. But afterwards, the place had become popular for organizing a great vacation for bungee jumping enthusiasts. But now the place was empty and had lost its former popularity. Yudai didn't understand what the stranger wanted to do to him, but Hiroki announced the start of the countdown and began to move the victim closer to the edge of the bridge. Yudai screamed and demanded to be released immediately, because it was all a mistake and he wasn't guilty of anything. But Hiroki advised him not to shake so much, as it might cause him to fall off the bridge prematurely. Yudai couldn't contain his emotions and demanded that the stranger introduce himself and stop his bullying. Hiroki calmly replied that he was just a simple man who loved children and did not tolerate the abuse of weak women. After all, children are the purest and most innocent creatures in this world, and Yudai was a man who was trying to hurt them. Hiroki immediately recalled the incidents in the subway, when an office worker had deliberately pushed a baby stroller and also deliberately undid the lock of a baby carrier. Yudai couldn't deny the obvious and stated that he was just having a terrible day, but he didn't want to hurt anyone. Hiroki laughed and replied that maybe that was the case, but it was still worth it to check how bad the previous day had been. After all, perhaps today would be much better than the previous day. Yudai realized what a dangerous situation he was in and began begging for forgiveness and asking to be let home. But before throwing Yudai off the bridge, Hiroki reminded him of the innocent little babies who had done no harm. And so Yudai must be punished for his meanness. Hiroki used a completely different device as a safety harness that served as an instrument of retribution. And it was an ordinary baby carrier, which of course could not support the weight of a grown man. Yudai, hanging over the raging river, heard the weak straps crack from the incredible pressure, and wet his pants with fear. But for Hiroki, this was just another good deed that he of course wanted to memorialize. The police officer was pleased with the result and watched as the baby carrier gradually tore under Yudai's weight. A few seconds later, retribution was served and the selfish office worker collapsed on a huge rock in the middle of the river. All this brought joy to Hiroki, and all he had to do was the hard work of retrieving his victim. A few days later, Rama was telling about her visit to her nephew and showing a picture of the cute baby. The girl asked how Hiroki had spent his weekend, and the guy hesitated over the answer. Hiroki told about exciting jumps from a huge height and also about fishing, where he managed to catch a huge fish. The guy of course could not tell the truth, but the emotions from the vacation conveyed absolutely accurately. Hiroki even boasted great photos from the vacation, but did not promise to show them, because it was already unnecessary. The guy only complained about a slight pain in the body after an active vacation, and Rama praised her colleague for a great time, even without knowing his true preferences. A young student, Naoki Yui, who preferred to call himself Naoking Star, decided to shoot a popular video in a family restaurant and ordered absolutely everything available on the menu. The guy decided to try all the dishes and make his independent review. But the student's behavior, which was too loud and only took small bites, irritated the staff and visitors of the restaurant. Such attention amused the student even more, and he only strived to create a more colorful video. The restaurant manager asked Naoki to behave more modestly next time and not to order so much food, as he was only spoiling the food. But this irritated the aspiring blogger, who ended up saying that he is not an ordinary person and has the right to order whatever he wants with his own money. Soon Naoki posted his video on a popular video hosting service and labeled it as his order at the family restaurant. YouTube was a popular service where people shared various video clips, and Naoki strived to succeed and reach the top of the video blogger rankings. Owners of popular channels on YouTube get good money for advertising in video clips, and the amount of money depended on the number of views. And if you become a popular channel owner, you can earn more than 100 million yen a year. But the student's channel, in spite of all his efforts, did not rise in the ranking, and it was almost no one visited, and the number of subscribers barely exceeded 50 people. The comments to the videos were negative and accused the author of dragging and boring topics. Naoki didn't want to believe that he was a bad blogger, because in his opinion other channels were much more boring, but unfairly turned out to be more popular. Another call from his parents irritated Naoki, and the guy once again refused to return home and become a regular employee in a government office. Naoki tried to be the best since childhood, and he really succeeded in his studies and sports. All of this made him a special child to outsiders. But usually such children in 80 cases become civil servants with low salaries and without much prospects. Naoki didn't want to be like everyone else and decided to monetize his talent and popularity. The guy wanted to get fame and earn huge money without spending many years of his life. For this purpose, the young guy decided to develop his own channel on YouTube and came up with a bright and memorable pseudonym Naoking Star. But in order to become a successful video blogger needed video clips that could attract a large audience of stupid people. One day, while looking for an interesting subject for a video, Naoki saw an eerie car accident that caused panic among the locals. The student, hungry for fame and money, threw away his moral principles and started making videos of wounded people suffering, where he emphasized human emotions. A video clip of an old man hitting a group of elementary school students caused a real breakthrough on Naoki's channel. In just a few hours, the number of views and subscribers increased hundreds of times, and it made the guy excited. Naoki already imagined the amount of money he would be able to earn thanks to the stupid public. The guy sincerely thanked the old man for the accident and did not worry about the injured children. As it turned out, 3 children died as a result of the accident. But for the young student, it was just a means of earning money. In just a couple of days developing this story, Naoki exceeded the number of subscribers to 300,000, and now he felt like a real video blogger who is able to make a lot of money. Naoki carefully monitored the comments of subscribers, which was a huge number, and skillfully tried to use the emotions of people. In the end, the student realized that for various idiots his candid videos are a drug, so it is necessary to capture something exciting. Naoki decided to keep walking around the city looking for a suitable subject for his videos. After reading an article in a magazine, Naoki learned that the journalists tried to interview the wife of the criminal, but the elderly woman did not answer any of the questions and the interview did not take place. The guy decided to develop the theme of incompetence of journalists and independently visit the wife of the old man who ran over the children. Of course, everything was only for the sake of a new popular video, and Naoki tried to colorfully talk about his desire to visit the house of the old man killer. As it turned out, the man who committed the accident lived in a great mansion, and Naoki quickly found the necessary address. But the door was not opened to him despite his insistence. Due to the huge audience, it was not a big deal to find out the address of the man. But Naoki decided to tell all of his subscribers and viewers the address of the man who committed the crime for more publicity. Naoki began purposely urging his subscribers and viewers to go to the murderer's house and express their displeasure with the crime. People responded to this provocation and really began to gather at the old man's house, taking pictures and leaving posts on social networks. All this allowed Naoki's channel to gain even more popularity and subscribers. In just one day, the channel of the novice video blogger gathered 670,000 subscribers, and it was an incredible success. Naoki really believed in himself and decided that to manipulate ordinary people is his true calling. After all he had to do was to follow the moods of his subscribers and give them what they wanted. To fulfill the requests of fans, Naoki decided to do anything, because the main thing was to keep his popularity. The next day, Naoki decided to try again to interview the killer's family, because the viewers liked the last video and wanted a sequel. The blogger's fans left inscriptions on the walls of the old man's house, and Naoki even managed to meet an attractive girl who was subscribed to his channel. But the police officers on patrol noticed a strange guy with a video camera and asked for identification. Even in this situation, Naoki decided to continue filming the video and tried in every way to make it more spectacular. The cops didn't appreciate such insolence and demanded to stop filming immediately, and then wanted to take the guy to the police station. Naoki quickly tried on the role of a victim and claimed his civil rights to freedom of speech and information. The police officers used physical force and tried to force compliance. This was exactly what Naoki was expecting, so he began to address the audience and talk about his cooperation with the police. This perplexed the officers, who still decided to act more carefully with the young guy. Meanwhile, Hiroki was in the lobby of the police station and was chatting with his colleague. Naoki spent some time watching the suffering of a woman who unsuccessfully tried to help the injured girl, and he had an idea to take advantage of the situation. Hiroki witnessed a young guy with a video camera leaving the police station after a brief interview and noticed the annoyance of his behavior among the regular patrolmen. Hiroki soon learned that the young video blogger had leaked the home address of a traffic suspect to the internet in pursuit of fame, and this led to a visit to the house by outraged people. Patrol officers then spotted the suspect Naoki outside the suspect's house, who continued to take videos and post information online. This irritated the police officers, because stirring up negative emotions in people could eventually lead to riots and crimes. Hiroki wondered about the young selfish guy who sought to make a profit by manipulating people's emotions. Resting after a day of work in his apartment, Hiroki found a video on the internet with an interesting love dance performed by attractive girls. The young police officer liked the dance very much and decided to record a video with his own performance of the dance. Meanwhile, Naoki enjoyed his video with the police officers who arrested him. This video was very much liked by the fans and added to the popularity of the author of the channel. The young guy realized that viewers wanted even more extreme videos and decided it was time to create something exciting. The next day, Naoki spent the whole day walking around the city and thinking about how he could create another popular video for his channel. To realize his idea, the guy went to the subway during the peak hour. Naoki looked at the people who rushed to boring jobs for a meager paycheck and considered them pathetic slaves. Naoki waited for the right moment to create another informational masterpiece for his channel. This time the guy overstepped the line and decided to create a high-profile event on his own. Naoki realized that it is not necessary to wait for some interesting events and they can simply create them with the help of cunning. According to the planned scenario, Naoki's accomplice started accusing a random man of harassment and skillfully asked for help. The man was shocked by the false accusations and felt embarrassed by the disdainful looks of the passengers. But Naoki's girlfriend continued to play her role of playing the victim. Naoki wasted no time and began filming the young girl accusing the man of the crime and demanding help from the police. The man of course denied everything, but Naoki began to resent the behavior of a grown man who allows himself unauthorized gestures towards the girl. As soon as the carriage doors opened, the agitated man decided to run away, but Naoki began to chase him and was happy to create another scandalous video. But a few minutes later, tragedy struck. The man trying to escape from the young guy with the video camera tripped and fell under the train. Everyone was shocked by the death of the man, and some witnesses even fainted from the terrible sight. Passengers rushed to call the police and the subway station duty officer. Naoki's accomplice looked at the dead man in horror and realized what her kind accusations had led to. Naoki, meanwhile, continued making videos and gave absolutely no thought to the consequences of his devious and dastardly plan. Soon the news of the man's death at the subway station spread across the city. According to preliminary information, the man was accused of inappropriate behavior during a subway ride and tried to escape. But the whereabouts of the victim's girlfriend could not be found out, and the police department took over the investigation of the incident. Young subscribers of Naoki's video channel were shocked by the horrific footage the author was able to capture, although some believed that all this is the result of skillful editing. But despite the different opinions, such attention again increased the rating of the young blogger. Naoki enjoyed his latest creation, because the last video with the death of a man broke all records of views and in the future could bring huge profits. It was a real celebration for Naoki, and he emptied another bottle of champagne without any remorse. Naoki continued to read the viewers' comments and enjoyed his success without paying any attention to the upset girl who played the role of the victim in the subway. The guy admitted that he did not even count on such success from his plan, but now he will be able to buy himself a sports car and maybe even a nice country house. And all this thanks to the huge views on this video. The girl could not stand it and said that she was not guilty of the man's death and was only following Naoki's orders. But the guy pretended that he didn't understand anything, and the girl only fantasized herself too much. The accomplice recalled the original plan where she was supposed to play the victim. But the greedy blogger replied that these are just words and the girl has no proof that he ordered to do such a thing. Therefore, no one would ever believe such accusations. Naoki reminded that he is a very popular person and the girl should be grateful for the opportunity to be around a celebrity. But the girl couldn't forget about the tragedy and started crying and regretting that she had agreed to participate in this whole nasty plan. But that only made Naoki laugh, and he proposed an even more horrible plan to his accomplice. The guy decided that it would be good to shoot a video where the girl suffers from guilt and wants to die, but all decides to communicate with a famous blogger. The girl was shocked by such a selfishness of Naoki, but the guy kept saying that it would greatly increase the rating of the channel and help to collect a huge number of views. Returning home after another walk, Naoki found a parcel and was very surprised because he hadn't ordered anything. Inside the envelope was a CD, and the guy decided to find out what was recorded on it. Naoki indifferently watched a video clip where a strange guy was performing a love dance, and only after a few minutes he realized that everything was happening in his apartment. Naoki didn't understand how this was possible, because there was no mistake and the stupid dance was really recorded in his room. Suddenly, Hiroki appeared from under the blanket on the bed, scaring the famous blogger. The police officer was creative and introduced himself as a new YouTube star. Naoki had no time to be indignant and was immediately hit with a stun gun. Upon waking up, Naoki realized he was in an unknown place and immediately noticed a huge screen with his image on it. In addition to the large TV, there was a video camera in the room that was filming Naoki and the guy's paralyzing fear. But the next moment Naoki was blinded by a bright flash of headlights and noticed a car approaching. Hiroki began another retaliation for the so-called good deeds to which he had devoted his secret half of his life. Naoki, showing excellent reactions, was able to jump aside at the last moment and avoid a fatal collision with the car. But it was only a delay from the inevitable, and Hiroki backed up sharply and ran over the guy's right leg, breaking it completely. Naoki screamed in terrible pain and everything that was happening was displayed on a huge screen. Hiroki calmly watched the suffering of the victim and stated that he had specially taken care of the encrypted tires that Naoki must like. Hiroki, imitating the popular blogger, filmed his suffering on a video camera, creating an original video. But Naoki didn't understand anything and asked for a medical emergency. But Hiroki didn't pay any attention to the guy's suffering and only asked him to show more emotions, because he was recording a great material for the audience. Naoki was stunned by the terrible leg injury and had long since felt the effects of the painful shock that paralyzed his consciousness. Hiroki continued to work the camera and told his victim that he needed as many exciting videos as possible for popularity. After all, the viewers must be satisfied and obliged to show interest in the original clips on the channel. Hiroki then ran over the guy's second leg and then his right arm. After his injuries, Naoki lost the ability to move and Hiroki decided it was time to take a photo for his magazine. Then the mysterious police officer started to watch the video he had created from the beginning and assess the quality of the footage. Hiroki was pleased with the result, because he saw real despair in his victim's eyes, and that was the main purpose of fair retribution. Soon Naoki ended his life in a huge furnace and remained forever a prisoner of his own selfishness, which ruined him. 3 young guys decided to get to know the girls and suggested that they spend an evening together setting off fireworks in nature. The girls turned out to be naive freshman students and of course wanted to have fun in good company. The guys behaved noisily and brazenly and did not pay attention to the fact that they were disturbing random passers-by. As a result, the noisy group continued their way along the evening street, chatting and joking among themselves. Tanashi suggested visiting the nearest supermarket and buying fireworks there for fun. The guys wanted to impress the girls as quickly as possible and enjoy their attention. Shota appreciated the rich selection of fireworks and carefully chose suitable packages. Meanwhile, Harada took care of the drinks and the boys discussed that despite their attractive figures, the girls they had met were still too ugly and would have to make do with the ones they had met. Harada admitted that he'd had too much to drink and was feeling very nauseous, which was hard to control. Shota immediately took a bottle of water and offered his friend a drink, as he thought it would help with the nausea. A few sips of cool water really helped to calm the drunk guy's stomach. But at that moment the store employee reminded him that he had to pay for the goods first, and then use them. Shota negatively perceived the remark and replied that it was not necessary to call the customers thieves and he was able to pay for the goods. The employee of the store tried to explain that he did not want to offend anyone and only wanted the visitors to follow the rules. Shota replied that his friend had become ill, and that's why there was no time to pay for the goods. After all, if the guy had fainted, it could have been on the conscience of the strict seller. Then Shota demanded to call the manager, because it would be easier to talk to him about the politeness of the store employees. But the guy explained that he was the manager of the supermarket, and was ready to listen to any complaints about the service. Shota continued to argue and called the manager an incompetent employee who should learn to be polite to customers. The manager decided not to argue and apologized for his possibly harsh statements, because he did not intend to insult anyone. But the drunken guys wanted to have fun and said that such changes did not suit them at all and maybe they would even leave a complaint. Shota said that the manager could solve the problem and get rid of the complaint only if he got on his knees now. The guy who could not lose his job decided to fulfill the demand and kneeled down. The manager then apologized once more, but that only increased the desire to humiliate someone for drunk guys. Harada for fun took a picture and ordered the manager to punch all the merchandise. Shota decided to go further and threw a bottle of water at the manager's head, which made him and Harada laugh out loud. After visiting the supermarket, the guys and the girls went to the riverbank where they were going to set off fireworks and drink alcohol. During the fun, the guys kept discussing the girls they met and of course wanted to have fun with them after they finished setting off fireworks. But suddenly a man with a dog came out of the darkness and said that it was forbidden to set off fireworks in this place, and even showed a forbidding sign that was set up on the bank of the river. The guys guessed that they were being reprimanded by a usually homeless man who lives in the area, and started insulting the man, demanding that he get out immediately and not interfere with their fun. The man did not expect such insolence from the young men and only continued to insist that they obey the rules of the area. Shota said that the real problem of this city is not fireworks, but homeless people and vagrants, who are just garbage. The guys started to mock the man and pretend that he stinks unbearably, and then demanded that he get out and not disturb normal people. But Shota decided to show his superiority and demanded that the man apologize for his words, as well as confess that he eats from garbage dumps. The girls did not appreciate such rudeness at all and started discussing among themselves the end of the party. Eventually, the girls said goodbye to the guys and hurriedly removed themselves from possible trouble. Harada tried to change the girls' minds, but ended up saying that it was even more fun without them, because they were too stupid. After that, the guy accused the homeless man that it was because of him that the girls went home and so they were left without entertainment. Shota decided to go further and threw a can of beer at the man. The man did not respond to the insult but hurried to hide in his shack. The guys went to have fun further and wanted to get drunk, but Shota held a grudge against the homeless man and wanted to take revenge on him. Eventually, Shota was able to convince his friends during the party to go back and take revenge on the homeless man. Everyone came to the consensus that the homeless man was to blame for leaving them without girls and therefore he should pay for his deed. Looking into the shack, Shota found out that the man was not at home and this upset the vengeful guy a little. But that didn't stop the guys from doing something nasty and they decided to trash the homeless man's place, hoping to have some fun. Shota called it cleaning the street from useless garbage and only such conscious citizens as they could do this important work. In a few minutes the shack was completely trashed, but Shota decided to consolidate his success and showed his friends a lighter. Shota decided to burn the remains of the dwelling to completely strip the homeless man of his belongings and see how quickly the cardboard structure would burn. Shota explained to his friends that they shouldn't worry, because no one would know what they had done and no one would help the homeless man. The homeless man's dwelling burned down in just a few minutes and it didn't provide the expected fun for the cruel guys who wanted more fun. Upon returning home, the homeless man was shocked by what he saw, for now they had nowhere to sleep. And the most unfortunate thing was that he had lost his prized possessions and pictures of his loved ones. The man cried with despair, not understanding why he was treated so unfairly, because he had lived a hard life and did not deserve such cruel treatment. But the guys watching the homeless man's reaction enjoyed his grief and laughed at the emotions he received. Meanwhile, Hiroki was frankly bored in his apartment and was happy when the courier brought him a long-awaited package. The police officer had been waiting for his order for a long time and was happy when he received a kit for growing shiitake mushrooms. This was another of Hiroki's hobbies, as he was very fond of this product. All he had to do to grow the gorgeous mushrooms was to sprinkle the preserves with water, and then place them in a special container, and wait for 3 days. Hiroki was so fascinated by the process of growing mushrooms that he even decided to watch them grow for a while before going to bed, because it was a really fascinating sight. A homeless man decided not to keep quiet about the incident that happened to his shack and reported the attack to the police. The group of guys meanwhile continued to have fun and they were happily reminiscing about how they had rid the homeless man of his dwelling, genuinely believing that they had thus brought order to the street. But in fact it was all perverted entertainment for selfish teenagers, and after the guys got drunk they went out again in search of adventure. Soon the guys found another homeless man's shack and decided to repeat their crime. This time Shota was better prepared and took a small bottle of gasoline and watered the shack, and then immediately set it on fire. The guys rejoiced and had fun without thinking about the consequences of their deed. They called themselves cleaners and street cleaners who helped their hometown get rid of trash. The guys continued to watch the bright flames and had fun feeling their superiority. But then they noticed passers-by approaching and of course cowardly decided to run away so as not to be held responsible for their act. The passers-by were shocked by the fire and rushed to call the rescue service to prevent more fires. But as it turned out, inside the shack was sleeping drunk homeless man, who did not have time to react to the deadly danger and woke up when the fire completely engulfed his dwelling. As the man screamed in pain and terror, the young men laughed as they ran away from the fire. The next day during lunch, Rima asked Hiroki about bringing food from home again. The boy explained that he always cooks at home and likes home-cooked food. Hiroki made stuffed shiitake with meat this time, and cooked shiitake with fried rice. The girl was delighted with her colleague's culinary skills, but didn't understand why the main product was mushrooms. Hiroki explained that he had managed to grow a good crop at home, and so he enjoyed the delicious mushrooms. Rima only joked that the talented investigator had opened the mushroom hunting season and now no one would escape his attention in the forest. After lunch, everyone learned from the newscast about the evening incident in which unknown people set fire to a homeless man's tent. The man was in serious condition with severe burns all over his body, but the details of the incident were unknown. It was also reported that a few days ago there was a similar incident with another homeless man living under the bridge, and therefore the police promised to investigate and find out all the circumstances of these cases. Hiroki immediately realized that it couldn't have been a mere coincidence, and Ramaz suggested that someone might have just started hunting homeless people. The girl was outraged that someone had decided to bully the weak and enjoy themselves that way. Hiroki immediately felt a surge of anger and a strong desire to deal with the guilty, but only in his own ways. In the evening, the company of guys as usual spent their time drinking alcohol, and after visiting the bar they went out again hoping to find some entertainment. Only during the walk the guys learned from the internet that now they were in the news, because yesterday when they set fire to the shack of a homeless man and it was a man who was badly hurt. But Shota told his friends that there was nothing terrible about it, because no one would know about their deed. Moreover, the police would not try to investigate because of some homeless person who had been injured. Just at that moment the guys noticed a dog in the alley, which they had already met a few days ago together with a homeless man. Shota showed aggression and kicked the dog, which angered the owner, the same homeless man whose house was burned down by the violent guys. The man of course understood everything and recognized the guys he met near his shack. He accused the teenagers of destroying his home. But Shota only laughed back and said that a homeless man does not have a home and therefore the man should take back what he said. But the man was furious over the lost items dear to him and grabbed the insolent guy by the shoulder. What the homeless man regretted the most was the burned photos of the family, which were no longer recoverable. Shota pushed the man hard, causing him to fall to the ground and hit his head. The young egoist was only worried about his expensive shirt that the homeless man might have soiled and decided to take revenge on the man for this. Shota said that the existence of the homeless was causing trouble for the people around him and it needed to be fixed. The guy swung a heavy umbrella and hit the homeless man on the head. The faithful dog tried to protect his master, but was unable to do so and also received a heavy blow. After that the guys continued beating the man, insulting him and calling him useless trash. But Shota decided that this would not be enough and grabbed an empty bottle that was lying on the ground. The maddened guy without any hesitation struck the man's head with the bottle, intending to kill the defenseless man. After a few minutes the guys realized that the homeless man was probably dead, because he stopped moving and did not try to resist anymore. The guys panicked and didn't know what to do in this situation, but Shota, the most violent of them, suggested that they cover their tracks immediately. He explained that if the police found out about the incident, they would not be able to avoid responsibility, and their lives would become hell. Shota suggested that they stick together and solve the problem. After a while, the guys loaded the homeless man's body into a car and took some shovels with them, and then went far away from the city. Soon the car brought the criminals into a dense forest, but the owner of the car was only concerned about the scratch left on the headlight. The guys quickly pulled out the man's body and decided to hide the evidence. But suddenly at that moment there was a faithful dog, which tried to defend its owner to the end. The guys decided that the dog somehow hid in the car and wanted to get rid of the animal. In the end, Shota managed to chase the dog away and began to hurry his accomplices, reminding them that tomorrow they had to get to school on time. Once deep in the forest, the criminals were sure that no one would ever find the man's body, but suddenly the homeless man started coughing and it shocked the guys. Without any hesitation, Shota decided to finish what he had started and made several blows with a shovel on the body of the homeless man. Then the guys started digging a hole to finally get rid of the evidence of their crime. All this took quite some time and morning was inexorably approaching. Satisfied with the depth of the dug hole, the guys dumped their victim at the bottom and quickly began to bury the innocent man. By an unbelievable coincidence, Hiroki was quietly picking mushrooms nearby and heard a strange noise in the depths of the thicket. A few minutes later, a dog ran out to meet him. At first glance it looked wounded and excited. The experienced investigator quickly guessed that the animal wanted to take him somewhere and show him something important. So Hiroki followed the dog to satisfy his curiosity. Soon the faithful dog pointed to the burial place of his master, and Hiroki found traces of blood and guessed what really happened here. Meanwhile, 3 young boys were trying to get out of the forest, which was shrouded in thick morning fog. Of course they got lost and had absolutely no idea which way their car was. The fog was so thick that the guys could not see the distance even a few meters in front of them. This natural phenomenon was used by the vigilante cop, who liked to take revenge on mean people more than anything else. Shota kept walking forward and didn't even notice how his friends disappeared. The guy started to panic, because he never managed to find the car, and soon he realized that there was no one near him. Shota decided that it was all just a stupid prank of his friends and tried to calm down and continued walking forward. After a few minutes, Shota felt someone's breath at his ear and didn't have time to react before the stun gun hit him. All three friends woke up bound in a deep hole and immediately tried to free themselves, but the knots were too tight, and they had no chance of escape. Hiroki stated that he was only going for mushrooms and did not expect to meet the real criminals in this forest who deserved to be punished. Then the experienced investigator said that he was actually the owner of the land, and the boys had made the stupidest mistake of their lives by coming here. Shota still hoped to get out of the trap and demanded their immediate release. But in a few minutes, Hiroki returned on a small excavator and began methodically burying the hole. The boys screamed in terror, realizing that with each new bucket they were getting closer and closer to their deaths. But Hiroki was completely focused on the process, and nothing could stop him from retaliating. The police officer would only say sometimes that he was just getting rid of unwanted trash, and those words became a sentence for the young criminals. Soon Hiroki finished the job, but in doing so he began to completely bury his victims. Only the heads of 3 boys were left free, who kept begging for help and asking for forgiveness. But that didn't matter to Hiroki, because he was getting ready to take another picture for his magazine. And then the 3 criminals were completely buried, just like their victim. Returning home with his new pet, Hiroki decided to grill the mushrooms and enjoy their great taste. The dog gladly accepted the new owner, and the guy decided to name his 4-legged friend Pazuzu. Unlike a man, the animal was not interested in fried mushrooms, and Hiroki decided that in this case he will get more. As it turned out, Pazuzu decided to play a little and suddenly jumped on Hiroki's back, causing him to drop the plate and scatter the fried mushrooms. The famous actor Morigi admitted at a big press conference that the rumors about his secret affair were true, and he personally wanted to apologize to his fans and colleagues he worked with, as he regretted his deception. Journalists were delighted with such a confession and literally poured questions to the famous actor. Everyone wanted to know more details about his personal life and how his lawful wife felt about the cheating. The next day, a popular television show was dedicated to the confession of actor Morigi, who was now the main character of a new scandal. The topics of discussion were the actor's personal life and the consequences that would affect his young child. The invited guest was Fuwa Renairo, whose opinion was listened to by many viewers. Everyone wanted to know how he relates to such situations and what he thinks about cheating famous actor. Fuwa perfectly played his role, and after a playful reflection said that he condemns such behavior and considers it a violation of moral principles. Fuwa reminded that he himself is a father of 2 children, and upbringing is hard work that requires daily effort. Fuwa then talked about his parents, who fought constantly, and it eventually destroyed their family and completely changed his life. Fuwa said that if a husband and wife do not find mutual understanding, it is better for them to separate quietly, but in no case to start a relationship on the side. This emotional performance was watched by the expert's wife and his young children. Near the end of the TV show, Fuwa said goodbye to the viewers and decided that it would be nice to have a drink and rest. The guy was clearly enjoying his popularity and noticed a fan. The fan turned out to be a TV employee, and he immediately praised Fuwa for his great comments that kept the viewers entertained. Fuwa replied that he was just speaking his mind and really condemned the famous actor's behavior. Fuwa then left the TV studio accompanied by his assistant, and the admiring staff thought that this man was the perfect husband and a great father. In fact, Fuwa built his career by publishing a worldwide bestseller that was entirely devoted to proper family life and child rearing. Fuwa was often invited on television, where admiring women saw him as a model family man and wanted to know more about his success. Fuwa showed himself as a modest man and pretended to be embarrassed by such attention, and constantly reminded that he is quite an ordinary man. The best-selling author told us that it is quite natural to be involved in raising a child. After all, every parent has to take on a lot of responsibility, and he is grateful to his beloved wife in many ways. The women in the studio were delighted with Fuwa's words and sincerely dreamed of hearing similar words from their own husbands. Fuwa skillfully played on the emotions of gullible women and called himself an ordinary father who found a vocation in raising children. and for him, that was enough to make him feel like a happy man who enjoyed life. But in reality, Fuwa considered his fans as real idiots who are ready to believe any lie and help him make huge money. Fuwa was not shy about spending time with his mistress, and the books he wrote on raising a child and taking care of the house were just a deception and a means of making money. In the arms of his mistress, the best-selling author called all women helpless and incredibly obedient creatures. The girl was shocked by such words and considered herself only a toy in the hands of Fuwa. But the guy had an incredible talent of persuasion and insinuated his mistress that she was special, as well as an insanely beautiful and intelligent woman. Fuwa really considered his mistress a very strange person, because she tried in every way to stay independent of men and did not feel modesty during intimacy. But still she was just an available toy to satisfy his fantasies, and Fuwa was happy to cheat on his wife in the arms of this beautiful woman. Usually after such meetings, the mistress again turned into a skillful assistant and told about future plans on television. Fuwa had long ago decided that cheating is certainly a great sin, but as long as no one knows, then it is possible to use their position for pleasure. The only thing that could not be forgotten was caution, and Fuwa was doing a great job of it. On his way home, the narcissistic best-selling author dropped his handkerchief, and Hiroki, who was walking his dog, noticed it. The police officer decided to return the lost item to the strange guy, but Fuwa thought it was just another fan who might have spotted him with his assistant. Fuwa quickly put on the mask of a popular person and praised the stranger for his attentiveness while waiting to ask for an autograph. Fuwa asked the strange guy with the dog to keep his place of residence a secret, because otherwise there would always be a crowd of fans gathering here. But Hiroki did not understand what he was talking about, because he was not familiar with Fuwa's work. The best-selling author quickly took a book out of his briefcase and autographed it, then gave it to the stranger with his best wishes. Hiroki, receiving the strange gift, was left puzzled by the stranger's behavior. Hiroki didn't pay too much attention to the occasion, though he forgot to return the lost handkerchief. The police officer was more concerned with Pazuzu's injured paw, which had almost recovered by now. As he continued to walk the dog, the police officer thought back to the last incident of retaliation and realized that his good deeds for which he leads a secret life were not over. Meanwhile, Fuwa reached his apartment and greeted his family. His wife responded in kind and offered to join him for dinner. The children were already seated at the table and eating dinner, but the dishes they saw irritated the best-selling author, and he instantly turned into a family despot. Fuwa began to resent the fact that his wife had cooked some disgusting half-finished products that made him sick. The girl apologized for such a simple dinner and tried to explain that she wasn't feeling well today, and it was hard for her to cook. But Fuwa replied that he didn't care at all about his wife's condition, because her physical condition was absolutely no reason not to do housework and fulfill her duties. The girl trembled with fear and asked for forgiveness, and Fuwa ordered to immediately throw all the food in the trash and start cooking something normal. The usual insults followed, and the girl obediently went to carry out the order. While his wife was doing housework and putting the kids to bed, Fuwa watched TV and laughed loudly without a care in the world. But even after that, Fuwa found a reason to insult and expressed his displeasure that the girl was taking too long to put the children to bed. To show his influence more, Fuwa kicked his wife and ordered her to do a better job. The girl started crying from the intense pain, but this only made the celebrated best-selling author even angrier. Fuwa stated that he had said many times about the importance of a healthy and long sleep for a child, because it is the key to productivity. The abusive boyfriend accused his wife of spending as much as 45 minutes putting the baby to bed and now making him worry. Fuwa started beating his wife, trying to show his superiority in this perverted way. The frightened girl could not resist the domestic despot and only asked for forgiveness for her transgression. After a while, Fuwa finished beating his wife and tried to explain to her that she was to blame for everything that was happening, and the pain was a reminder of the importance of doing everything right. But Fuwa decided not to stop there and ordered her to keep her clothes on, because he wanted to feel like the master of the situation and dominate his wife. Fuwa every time in such a situation tried to make his wife believe that she was helpless and unable to do anything right without his help, and he sincerely tries to help and tolerate her mediocrity. Early in the morning, as usual, Fuwa left his apartment and went to play the role of a famous person. His wife almost never left the apartment and got busy preparing breakfast for the children. At the same time, the girl watched an edition of the morning show where her husband again expressed his expert opinion on the situation with famous actors. But the young son had already reached the age when he could understand everything that was going on in the family and looked at his father's face on TV with hatred. The boy turned to his mother and asked how much pain she was in after yesterday's scandal with his father. The girl's condition was indeed very terrible and her eye was poured a dark blue color. The mother explained to her son that she had only fallen because of her carelessness and bumped herself, for she was very clumsy. The girl tried to distract her son from her appearance, but it was impossible. The boy thought a little and asked his mother if his father had really gone mad. But the girl ignored the child's question and it only upset the boy. The mother showed absolute indifference to her son's worries and offered Taro to drink milk and calm down. Eventually, the girl explained that there were no problems in their family and in fact she deserved to be beaten by her father, because she was very stupid and could not do everything right. A few days later, Fua went on vacation with his family to the countryside, because it was necessary for another TV show, and to create the image of a model family man. The whole situation was completely staged and Fua had to look like the best husband and father. Everyone discussed how this beautiful man, despite his hard work on television, always found time for his beloved family. Fuma tried his best to play a false role as he needed to maintain his image. Even though he was irritated by the burnt meat, Fua kept smiling and offered his young son to join him. But Taro had long since disliked his father and was not at all happy about such companionship. Fua certainly did not understand his child and considered him just a tool to achieve popularity. Suddenly there was a phone call from an unspecified number and Fua decided that he was again bothered by the manager of some silly family program and wanted to invite him to the air. But as it turned out, the author of the bestseller called One Modest Girl, who has not seen Fua for a very long time and about whom he has already managed to completely forget. During the conversation, Fua began to remember that Himari was another victim of his deception, and after they spent the night together he deleted her number and never thought about her. The next day, the best-selling author still decided to meet the distraught girl in an underground parking lot. Himari confessed that she was 4 months pregnant and Fua was the father. The girl asked for help in this difficult situation because she needed at least advice and support. Fua mentally hated the girl, who in his opinion did not use contraceptives on purpose and is now trying to insinuate that he is the father of the child. The guy explained that even if Himari decided to have this baby, they still wouldn't be able to be together or even see each other. But Himari was emotionally distressed and explained that she had to quit her job at the convenience store and now she has absolutely no money, so she found no other option but to ask for help. Fua continued to play the role of the caring boyfriend and praised the girl for calling him and daring to tell him everything, as it was really hard for her to be alone in this situation. Then the author of courses on family life promised to help with the help of an excellent doctor and to pay for his services. After all, in this situation there is no other choice but to have an abortion, and it is better to do so as soon as possible. Himari did not expect to hear such a proposal, but the guy advised not to worry and promised to take care of her safety, because a few days after the hospital no one will even know about her pregnancy. Fua began to insinuate to Himari that she would not be able to raise a child on her own, as she had no money and no education for it, and therefore abortion was the only right way out for her in this situation and she should accept the offer. Fua tried his best to take advantage of the girl's emotional state and created the image of a caring man who would not stand for his child to live in poverty and starve. His gestures, facial expressions, and demeanor were perfectly honed to instill his will, and Fua pointed out the correctness of terminating the pregnancy. Eventually, Himari gave in and agreed with her boyfriend. Fua was happy at that moment and immediately handed the girl an envelope with money for the hospital and related expenses. The lying best-selling author said goodbye that he had no pity for the welfare of such a beautiful girl, although in fact he was only helping himself. Having gotten far away from where he met the girl, Fua pondered the fact that Himari had actually set the whole thing up and only wanted to get money from him. But now the problem was solved and they would never see each other again. In fact, this wasn't the first time the best-selling author had been in this situation and had paid for several abortions for different girls over the past 7 years. As Fua drove home, Hiroki was walking with his pet nearby and had no idea what was about to happen in the near future. 10 months later, Fua was still shining on television and attending the most popular TV shows. But on one of the usual days, while leaving the studio with his assistant, he noticed Himari. The girl had changed a lot since the last time they met and now she was holding a small baby, which irritated Fua. The author of the family life textbook decided to meet the girl and realized that Himari was living in some horrible place. Himari immediately apologized for bothering him, because she wasn't really looking for this meeting and everything happened by accident. Himari was still that silly and naive girl who believed in kindness, and so she explained that she often remembered Fua and longed to talk to him. But the guy was far from pure thoughts, and after a little thinking asked how much Himari wanted to get for her silence. The girl was shocked by this answer and said that she had never thought about money, but Fua demanded not to lie, because there could be no other motives. Fua girl in creating a cunning plan. After all, she got pregnant on purpose many months ago and now wants to provide her miserable life with easy money. Himari asked not to say that, because it wasn't true and she wasn't going to blackmail anyone for money. Himari talked about how she was really going to go to the hospital after their meeting and get rid of the baby. But then she felt an overwhelming desire to keep the baby as she realized that it was a part of her life and she couldn't get rid of it. As a result, she decided to have the baby and raise it on her own without burdening anyone with her worries. Fua, of course, did not believe in these sincere words and again wanted to solve all the problems with the help of money. The popular author took out a huge sum of money from his briefcase and threw it on the floor. Himari silently began to collect all the money and Fua felt victorious in this situation. But as it turned out, the girl only wanted to give it back. Himari stated quite calmly that she didn't need the money and didn't want to take it from the hands of someone who didn't believe her. The young mother then pulled out of her bag the very envelope with the money she had received many months ago, and also tried to return it to its owner, proving the purity of her intentions. Himari explained that she was raising a child on her own and didn't want help in the form of money. Fua couldn't take such an insult, as he wasn't capable of believing in people's sincerity, and hit the girl out of anger. Fua finally showed his true personality and started beating the young mother, just as he had done with his wife, accompanied by insults. Fua shouted that Himari was just a stupid woman who couldn't earn her own money, and therefore not worthy of being a mother. The child woke up and started crying, but even that couldn't stop the domestic despot. Himari quietly moaned in pain, and Fua continued to convince the girl that there was no way she would be able to raise the child and provide him with the worst possible life. After an attack of aggression, the author of books, as usual, began to ask for forgiveness and decided to put compensation in the form of money, believing that it could make up for his guilt. But the girl did not react at all to everything that was happening and had long been unconscious. At the same time, in the room there was a loud crying of children, which only intensified with each passing minute. Fua decided that Himari was just exaggerating her serious condition and tried to make him feel better about it, because he didn't think he had hit her that hard. But after a few minutes, the egotistical author of the books began to realize that a real tragedy had occurred and the girl was not showing any signs of life. Fua began to panic and immediately realized that his successful career created for 15 years will simply disappear in an instant when everyone learns of this murder. Thoughts were born in the head of the deceitful man and decided that perhaps no one would notice his presence in this apartment, because such a silly girl like Himari is completely uninterested in anyone. Meanwhile, the small child continued to cry and it caused another fit of anger in the guy. Fua tried to calm the child, but it was impossible because children feel evil. In the end, the soulless killer decided to hide the child in a closet and thus reduce the noise from his crying. Fua calmed down a bit and began to realize that no one really knows about his relationship with Himari, and the manager and mistress who had seen the girl obviously wouldn't accuse him of anything terrible. Fua began to carefully pick up the money scattered on the floor, trying to conceal his presence in the apartment. But despite his cruelty, he was an inconsiderate man and did not notice the bill that flew under the furniture. The famed author of family books tried to cover all traces of his crime as much as possible and began to carefully wipe his fingerprints wherever he could touch the objects. Soon, having finished cleaning, Fua carefully left the apartment and was happy because he met no one on his way. Closing the door of the dwelling where a small child was still screaming, the soulless man continued to blame the dead girl for everything, because in his opinion she had done everything wrong. A few hours after Fua left the scene of the crime about this incident, learned about the police and arrived at Himari's apartment. Hiroki and Rama were part of the investigative task force and immediately learned that there were no signs of forced entry into the apartment. During the examination of the crime scene, the forensic investigators found a rather large 10,000 yen bill under the nightstand and reported it immediately. Hiroki asked to have the bill examined and to identify any possible fingerprints on it. After that, the investigators talked to the owner of the apartment, because it was she who reported the terrible discovery and was shocked by the murder of a young girl. As it turned out, Himari lived in this apartment for more than 5 years and was never seen in any dubious situations. The owner of the apartment said that this nice girl was always friendly and kind, and often helped her in various situations. The elderly woman said that she was very worried when she learned that Himari had decided to become a single mother and tried to help her in her daily life. They kept in close contact and Himari visited the landlady every day with her son, But today she did not come, and this caused concern. The landlady immediately decided to visit her young friend and rang the doorbell. But as it turned out, the door was unlocked. After the woman entered the apartment, she found the body of the young girl, as well as her young son, locked in the closet. The landlady had already managed to contact the girl's parents and told them the terrible news, but now the grandparents would at least be able to pick up their grandson and take care of him. The elderly woman was too excited and worried a lot about such a loss, because it was all unfair. The owner of the apartment continued crying and asked the investigators to find the culprit and punish him for this terrible murder, because it was impossible to allow this man to remain unpunished. The woman confessed that she wanted to strangle with her own hands the bastard who had done such a cruel thing to the young mother and left the child an orphan. After examination of the body and medical examination, it was possible to find out the time of death, and the cause of death, which was internal hemorrhage, was named. The police criminalist explained that the young girl had received many strong blows to the stomach and someone had been beating her for a long time, taking advantage of her physical superiority. Shortly thereafter, the homicide squad held a meeting on this high-profile case where all the evidence obtained was presented. The most important piece of evidence was a 10,000 yen bill that contained fingerprints that did not belong to the victim. After a thorough examination of the available fingerprints, it was found that they belonged to different people, and it was difficult to match the exact match to a specific person. The head of the homicide division was dissatisfied with the result of the work and inquired about other available evidence. But as it turned out, the criminal acted in cold blood and was able to destroy all the fingerprints that could shed light on his presence in this apartment. It was also found out that the murdered girl 10 months ago visited the Clinic of Obstetrics and Gynecology to have an abortion. But in the end, Himari changed her mind and decided to keep the child. And after that, she got a job and honestly earned money. The young mother also enjoyed the support of the state and received all the necessary benefits. At the same time, there was no information about the possible father, and it was not reflected in any way in the documents on the child. Also, thanks to the testimony of neighbors and the owner of the house, it was found out that the girl had never been in contact with men and was not seen in illegal actions. The personal life of the victim turned out to be a complete mystery for the investigators, and the head of the homicide department demanded to know as many details as possible about the fate of the victim. Also, the version about robbery was immediately rejected, as the girl had no valuable property and even had no bank account. All this seemed a real mystery, and the head of the homicide department decided that this case could be a dead end, because they could not even find out the motives of the criminal. Soon the news about the brutal murder of a young mother leaked on television, and greedy representatives of the media decided at the expense of this to raise their ratings by organizing a real show. Of course, the honored expert Fuwa was invited to discuss this serious topic. The killer tried to keep himself in control because he was really nervous before discussing his own crime. The host of the TV show described the crime in great detail and of course did not forget to talk about the victim's young son, who was now safe. The presenters then asked the studio guests to comment on what had happened. Fuwa was on the verge of an emotional breakdown, continuing to blame Himari for everything. But then after a long pause, he began to talk. Fuwa once again showed himself a great actor and began to tell how his heart breaks at the mere thought that among them walks a man who is capable of such a terrible crime. And to make it more convincing, the lying expert started crying. The directors of the show were delighted and emphasized all the attention of the cameramen on Fuwa's face. Such behavior of the expert was a real gift and ensured the growth of the show's rating. Just at that moment, Fuwa's assistant and mistress was trying to remember where she had seen the victim before. Investigator Hiroki happened to be one of the viewers of the morning show and watched the suffering of the man on the screen with interest. Fuwa kept crying and expressing his condolences and rejoiced that a small child locked in a closet was unharmed and survived the attack of a brutal killer. After the dramatic airing of the morning show, Fuwa felt like a real star again and generously signed autographs for fans enjoying his popularity. Hiroki immediately understood everything and recognized this man as the guy who gave him the book on the street. The popular TV expert's behavior was too suspicious and Fuwa made an unforgivable mistake during the broadcast. The same evening, Fuwa took part in another popular women's show, where he is a regular guest, and thanks to his books he significantly raised the rating. Fuwa played the role of an expert and answered various questions from the audience. This time, one of the girls asked why her husband refused to change the baby's diapers. Fuwa stated that it's not really worth blaming the man and forcing him to do such things, as he should have completely different responsibilities. After the end of the evening show, all the viewers went home and Fuwa continued to stay in his dressing room. Among the studio staff, no one paid attention to the man in the mascot costume who was moving freely in the hallway. Fua complained to his assistant about the horrible stench in the auditorium and promised to never agree to work in government conference rooms again. Fua was also annoyed by the idiot who was always present in a silly suit. The illustrious expert then ordered his assistant to make him tea immediately and advised him to do it as soon as possible. The girl did not argue with her rude boss and quickly left the room. After the murder, Fua had already calmed down because the police had no interest in him, so he was able to avoid punishment, and now he could forget about the case with the talentless Himari. The impunity gave Fua the confidence that he was invulnerable, and he decided that the police were not investigating him at all. Suddenly, the best-selling author noticed in the mirror the reflection of the very man in a silly suit and shuddered with surprise. Fua was very frightened by such an unexpected appearance and could not stay on his feet. The guy didn't understand why this fool had snuck up on him so suspiciously. Fua was annoyed by the appearance of the uninvited guest, but still decided to play the role of a polite guy and left an autograph on his book. But just at that moment, a stun gun intervened and sent the family expert into the realm of Morpheus. After a while, Fua woke up with a terrible pain in his head and realized that he was in a dark room and could not move at all. After a few minutes, the lights in the room came on and the screen of a huge TV turned on, showing an old American horror movie. Only now did Fua realize that he was in a large aquarium and was horrified at his situation. The author of the books tried to escape from the trap and began to scream, but Hiroki advised to keep quiet and enjoy the process. Hiroki opened the faucet and the aquarium began to fill up quickly. The mysterious Avenger explained to his victim that people were often tortured in this way in the past, and in the Middle Ages such torture was called the mercy seat and was a very popular way to get the necessary information. According to some evidence, in the United States still practice this method to get even the most persistent spies of enemy countries to talk. Therefore, this would be the perfect entertainment for tonight and would allow Fua to show his frankness. Gradually, the water level in the aquarium reached a critical point and Fua could no longer contain his emotions. But Hiroki waited for the right moment and talked about his love for water sports. After all, when people swim on water, they have to constantly swim to the surface to breathe in fresh air. Hiroki asked if the expert could now explain the similarities between swimming and torture. But Fua was already completely desperate and screaming with all his might. Hiroki answered his own question and explained to the victim that in both cases the person was short of air and at risk of drowning. Fua begged for mercy and begged to be let go, but Hiroki continued to talk about how all of humanity originated from the sea and therefore being in the water was natural for everyone. Eventually, when the water almost completely covered the victim's head, Hiroki explained that Fua was involved in the murder of an innocent young girl. After all, he himself had made a confession on television when he mentioned the small child found alive in the other room. The doomed expert didn't realize his mistake and replied that he was merely commenting on the anchor's words. But Hiroki said that in fact the media did not tell the details of the murder, and no one but the police knew what exactly had happened to the small child. Therefore, this information could only be known by the murderer, and a large money bill was found in the victim's apartment during the search. After examination, the bill was found to have fingerprints on it. Fua was shocked because he was sure he had collected all the money in the room. Hirako stated that the fingerprints found on the bill from the victim's apartment matched the fingerprints left on the book Fua had given him outside the house. The family expert was horrified, for he had truly realized his fatal mistake. Hiroki enjoyed the desperation in the victim's eyes and explained that the police were already working to arrest the young mother's ruthless killer. Fua thought he was facing an ordinary policeman who merely wanted to extract a confession in such a brutal way. The best-selling author began to threaten Hiroki and promised to tell all this on television, as well as to end the guy's career in the police force. But a few minutes later, when the water level rose even higher, Fua pleaded guilty to killing the young girl. But he immediately began to say it was an accident and not his fault. Fua was scared to death and wanted to get out of the aquarium. But all his words and confessions did not influence Hiroki's decision. The young police officer quickly found the necessary page in Fua's book and projected the way the author joyfully describes the pregnancy of his beloved wife. But none of this was comparable to the reality in which Fua forced girls to have abortions. Hiroki then accused his victim of psychological and physical abuse towards his wife and his children and asked why this was different from his noble stance stated in the book. Fua was shocked and asked how Hiroki was able to know all this, but that only elicited a smile from the young investigator, and he defiantly slammed the book shut, stating that such behavior was unacceptable. A few seconds later, Hiroki's hand with the knife plunged into the water and Fuwa cried out from the sharp pain below his abdomen. The young investigator stated that now the family despot could take it easy on the unwanted children. Fuwa asked for an answer as to why Hiroki was avenging the death of a girl unknown to him, but the young investigator replied that it wasn't the main reason for such punishment at all. Hiroki described himself as a responsible police officer who was merely investigating the murder of a man, but only by his own methods. Fuwa was horrified by Hiroki's cold-bloodedness and all submerged underwater trying to hold his breath as long as possible. But this situation could not last long and Hiroki was already preparing for the final photo for his retribution collection. The young investigator looked at his victim for a while longer, who in a way resembled the man at the moment when he was not yet born. But only now it was the end of the vile man's life journey. Soon all the media were abuzz with the news that the Metropolitan Police Department said that in the apartment where the attack on the young girl was completely found significant evidence pointing to the guilt of a very popular character. At the moment the police are investigating the case of Fuwa Rintaro, who was a commentator on the program about the murder of Mrs. Himari. The entire public is waiting for new details of this high-profile investigation and wants to soon learn all the circumstances that led to the death of a young girl. But at the moment nothing is known about Mr. Fuwa, as he disappeared a few days ago and may be intentionally hiding from responsibility. Fuwa's former manager witnessed that her boss had met with the victim a few days before her death, but unfortunately she was afraid to tell the police about it because Fuwa threatened to kill her. In the end, after a second examination, Fuwa's fingerprints were found in the victim's apartment, and the investigation revealed that they had been lovers in the past. As it turned out, Mr. Fuwa's wife had known about her husband's infidelity for a long time, but could not say anything about it, as she was subjected to domestic violence. Soon Mr. Fuwa's wife decided to move far away from where she lived with her husband to stop being a target for constant interview requests. The children were happy to be able to live in their grandmother's house, as there was nothing here to remind them of their horrible father. The eldest son promised his mother that he would definitely protect her and his little brother, so no one should ever be afraid of anything again. Hiroki was satisfied with the result of his work, because now good people could continue to live a normal life, and the scoundrel received a deserved punishment. Shortly after completing the investigation into the death of a young girl, Himari, the police homicide squad went on vacation to a hot spring. Hiroki tried not to advertise his identity as a police officer during the trip in order to avoid unnecessary unpleasant situations. The police chief Mitsuhiko Hachiya, who was really tired from his hard work, also went on vacation with his officers, and now he could relax and socialize with his fellow police officer Keitaro Kumada. Sometimes Mitsuhiko would start a conversation about unfinished investigations, but Keitaro would demand that they stop talking about work immediately and remind them that they should rest. Hiroki joined his colleagues at the hot spring and praised the place for being a great place to relax and forget about pressing problems. Keitaro was more pleased than the rest that the beautiful female employee Rama had gone along with them on vacation and suggested that they all have dinner together at some nice place. While walking along the evening streets, Hiroki treated his colleagues to delicious buns in the shape of an animal that reminded him of a pet. After that, the noisy group of police officers went to a shooting range, where everyone decided to prove themselves in target shooting. Hiroki also participated in the competition, but for some reason he continued to feel an inexplicable uneasiness. Because of the unexplainable feeling of anxiety, the young investigator lost the shooting competition and gave the lost amount of money without talking. After that, the officers gathered at a joint dinner, during which Keitaro talked about the benefits of using a special protein that helped build muscle mass, which only caused a huge number of jokes from colleagues. Suddenly, Chief of Police Mitsuhiko left the room and began talking excitedly on the phone. Hiroki took notice and asked what was going on with him. Keitaro suggested that most likely the chief was keeping a close watch on what was going on at work and often discussing the current situation at the station. After all, he was too responsible a man. Keitaro said that the chief of police always has important things to do, so he tries to go to the crime scenes personally, so it's possible that he may be back on duty now. It's unlikely to last very long, though, because it's not a pretty girl who works there. Keitaro thoughtfully continued to talk about the importance of police work, but then he was distracted from his unpleasant thoughts and reminded Hiroki that his food was getting cold and he needed to eat. Then the guys asked Hiroki if he had a favorite girl that he comes back to after a tiring job. Hiroki didn't know how to answer this question and of course got a portion of jokes about what a perfect guy he is and tries to keep everything a secret. But after some thought, Hiroki decided to keep the conversation going and explained that he had never really thought about his personal life, and maybe he wasn't mature enough to start a family. Hiroki calmly talked about how during high school he did have a man he truly loved. The guys asked for details about the girl who was able to win the heart of the unflappable Chief Hiroki. Guy explained that the cute girl was incredibly intelligent, and her bright emotions literally drove him crazy and made his heart beat several times harder. Rima called this attitude towards the girl very cute, and the guys realized that their serious colleague was really very much in love. But then followed more questions about the development of that relationship and where that beautiful girl was now. Hiroki thought for a few minutes, but decided to tell the truth and explained that unfortunately she had died.